you're not alone. There are millions of Americans out there that have not complied with their filing obligations with the U.S. Most of them, in my opinion, due to lack of understanding of the rules that apply to them, and by no fault of their own. It's an incredibly complicated subject matter, and one that I believe needs to get a lot of attention from the U.S. government in terms of being able to provide you with the information you need so that you don't fall out of compliance. But let me give you the actual answer to the question. There are three major points that I'm going to address, and they're by no means the only points to take into consideration. You should only consider this video answer as a starting point for the research that you need to do in order to make a decision as to how to approach your coming back into compliance. It's not something that any practitioner is going to help you with. We or any other practitioner are going to be more than happy to provide you with the information so that you can make that decision. But at the end of the day, it's your responsibility, so please be sure to read up and understand not only, again, on those three elements that I'm going to mention, but any others that derive from there. So the first element for you to consider when answering this question is the fact that not filing your U.S. tax returns on a timely basis constitutes a criminal activity. You can go to jail for not filing your U.S. tax returns, even if at the end of the exercise the tax due is zero. Unfortunately, the way the law reads is such. You know, obviously not something that anyone wants, not a position that anyone wants to be in. Let's look at the alternative. Because many people think that they're going to have to pay taxes to the U.S., and that's the reason why they don't file their tax returns. Another very popular reason is how complex it is. But let's pretend for an example that you're concerned that you're going to have a tax bill, and you're saying, well, I'm not going to file my tax returns now because I have no way of paying those taxes. Well, not filing your tax returns is a criminal offense, but not paying your taxes is just a civil offense. The difference is jail time. If you don't file your tax returns, you can go to jail. If you file your tax returns but you don't pay any amount that is due, jail time is not a possibility. There's going to be plenty of collection activity, but you're not going to go to jail. In my opinion, one of the three major elements that answer the question, what should you do if you haven't filed your tax returns in several years? The answer is clear. File as soon as possible, and make sure you file. If you're gonna self-file, make sure you read up and you understand as much as possible. There are certain scenarios where I believe that a U.S. taxpayer should be able to prepare his own tax returns. But be careful. If there are any elements of your tax return that you don't feel 100% comfortable with, be sure to look for qualified assistance. Just to give you a silly example, Form 5471, if it's missing one line, one element, one piece of information, it's deemed unfiled. Unfiled means it's going to leave the statute of limitations open, and you're going to get an automatic $10,000 penalty. So just a silly mistake can take away from your major effort of coming back into compliance. And I'll talk about the statute of limitations in a second. The second element I'd like to discuss in answering your question is the fact that you will lose the right to the foreign earned income exclusion if you don't timely file. If the IRS has to come looking for you, in theory, they have the right to disallow your foreign earned income exclusion. Remember, that's what makes the first $92,900 of earned income federal or income tax free. It's a very, very important tool that allows you to live tax free while you're living outside the U.S. But if the IRS has to come looking for you, they may disallow it. According to the tax code, they are entitled to disallow it. In practice, I haven't seen them do it, but that doesn't mean that you want to test them, for lack of a better terminology. That's the second most important reason why you need to file your tax returns as soon as possible. You do not want to lose the right to the foreign earned income exclusion. If you live in a jurisdiction that is already charging you taxes, then it's not so much of a big issue because you can still fall back on the foreign tax credit. But if you live in a tax-free country, losing the right to the foreign earned income exclusion can translate into a significant tax bill. And the third element that I would like to discuss in properly answering your question, what should you do if you haven't filed your tax returns in several years, is the statute of limitations. Explaining the statute of limitations in itself, I'd like to do that in a separate video. I'm just going to address as it relates to this question. And what's important is the IRS has the right or is allowed by law to ask you questions on your tax return challenge your position on the tax return, ask you for supporting documentation, or in general audit you for 3 years after you filed your tax return. This means, this is very important for people that haven't filed in several years, because we're going to go back in a couple of seconds. We're going to talk about how many years back should you file. But as it relates to the point I'm trying to make, if you don't file a tax return, the IRS could come back and audit you, challenge you, assess additional tax, etc., 25, 30 years, 50 years from now. There's going to be no statute of limitations, because remember, the statute of limitations is 3 years after the time you filed. Again, there's a lot of fine print to that. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. But the bottom line is 30 years from now, they can come looking for you. Now, a question I get asked a lot, well, how are they going to catch me? It's not an answer, it's not a question, or it's not a topic I'm going to go too much into, because that's not how the U.S. tax code is designed. The U.S. tax code relies on the U.S. citizens wanting to be compliant with tax law. So, I get the question all the time, well, I have my, I live in Singapore, I live in Thailand, I live in Colombia, it's under my wife's name, it's under somebody else's name. Well, everything that you say surrounding not getting caught constitutes criminal intent. So all I can say surrounding that is don't do it. And then you would say, well, how are they, I don't care if the statute of limitations doesn't close. How are they going to find out 30 years from now? Again, I think that falls into the same category as to the question that I didn't think we should talk about right now, which is how are they going to catch me? But rather understanding that there are plenty of tools the IRS has to bring you back into compliance. One of them, for example, is the whistleblower reward. 30 years from now, someone becomes privy to the information that you didn't file certain years' tax returns. If they go to the IRS and that results in taxes and penalties charged to you, that would mean a reward for that person. That's one of the ways they can catch you. But again, I don't want to talk so much as how they can catch you, because that's besides the point. Your responsibility by law is to be completely transparent with the U.S. and report your worldwide income through a tax return on a yearly basis. Now, here's another scenario. It is possible that you do not have a filing requirement due to income, but you have foreign bank accounts to be reported, or you have interest in controlled foreign corporations that would give rise to a filing requirement of Form 5471. If you have a filing requirement of 5471 and otherwise no taxable income, you still need to file a tax return. And the same elements apply that we just discussed, the statute of limitations, it's not going to close, the automatic penalty for Form 5471. So in any year in which you had a filing requirement for Forms TDF 9221, namely FBAR, or Form 5471, you want to file a tax return. Now, in this particular case, you might want to look at the new filing compliance procedures that the IRS came up with for American citizens living abroad. That might be a particular scenario where you could take advantage of that, but there's a lot of reading up to do on your part.